Growing up in a home where the ground always seemed to shift beneath your feet, you learned very early that love was not a soft place to land, but a complex puzzle you had to solve every single day. You might carry a heavy, unspoken weight in your chest when someone tries to get close to you now. An instinctive urge to pull back or create distance before they can see the parts of you that you've spent a lifetime hiding. This protective wall wasn't built out of malice, but out of a desperate necessity to survive an environment where your needs were secondary to the emotional whims of a parent who couldn't see you for who you truly were. Today, we are going to walk through the shadows of those early memories to understand why your heart feels the need to guard itself so fiercely, and how you can finally begin to feel safe in the presence of others. The origin of this deep-seated pain often lies in the quiet rooms of a childhood where emotional stability was a rare luxury rather than a given right. You may remember the way you had to scan your parents' face the moment they walked through the door, looking for the tiny micro-expressions that signaled whether it was a day for peace or a day for walking on eggshells. In those moments, you weren't just a child. You were an emotional detective, learning that your safety depended entirely on your ability to manage the volatile moods of the adults around you. As you internalized this constant unpredictability, you began to believe that if things went wrong, it must have been because you weren't observant enough or quiet enough to keep the peace. You took the heavy burden of their emotional well-being onto your small shoulders, trading your own playfulness for a watchful, heavy maturity that no child should ever have to carry. This was the beginning of a long journey where you learned that to be loved, or even just to be safe, you had to be the one who held everything together while your own heart went unnoticed. The weight of this responsibility became the foundation of your world, teaching you that your presence was only valuable if it served to soothe someone else's storm. You learned to silence your own voice before it could even form a thought, fearing that any expression of your true self might disrupt the fragile balance of the home. This early conditioning created a deep fracture in your soul, where you began to view your own needs as dangerous inconveniences that had to be suppressed at all costs to ensure your survival. This inversion of roles meant that before you even knew how to tie your shoes, you were already acting as the emotional caretaker for people who were supposed to be taking care of you. You learned to anticipate needs before they were spoken, and to bury your own frustrations deep inside so they wouldn't add to the chaos of the household. Your value became tied to how well you could stabilize the environment, making you a master of reading the room while becoming a stranger to your own inner world. By becoming the stabilizer, you essentially gave up your right to have a childhood characterized by curiosity and mistakes. You became the adult in the room because the actual adults were too consumed by their own needs and reflections to provide the structure you required. This role inversion created a blueprint for your future relationships, teaching you that intimacy equals responsibility, and that being close to someone means losing yourself in the service of their emotional demands. You became an expert at emotional alchemy, trying to turn their leaden moods into something golden and safe, yet the cost was your own sense of self. This labor was never finished, as the goalposts for their satisfaction were constantly moving, leaving you in a state of perpetual exhaustion. You carried the fear that if you stopped performing this role for even a second, the entire structure of your life would come crashing down around you. The psychological mechanism behind this is a profound sense of hypervigilance that never truly turns off, even when the threat is long gone. You developed an attic full of survival responses, where your brain became wired to detect the slightest shift in tone or posture as a sign of incoming rejection or anger. While some might call this a survival tactic, in emotional terms, it is a state of constant high alert that prevents you from ever feeling truly relaxed or present in your own body. This hypervigilance is a form of parentification that forced you to grow up too fast, leaving the softer, more vulnerable parts of you trapped in the past. You learned to navigate the world through a lens of fear, believing that being seen clearly was dangerous because it made you a target for criticism or manipulation. Even now, your nervous system might react to kindness with suspicion, wondering what the catch is or when the other person will finally realize you aren't as perfect as you try to appear. Your body remembers the tension of those years, holding on to the stress in your shoulders and the tightness in your chest as if the danger is still present. You are constantly scanning for exits, both physical and emotional, because you have been taught that being trapped in someone else's narrative is the ultimate threat. This survival response was brilliant for a child in a war zone, but for an adult seeking love, It has become a cage that keeps the very connection you crave just out of reach. As you grew, a performer identity began to take shape. A mask designed to be exactly what everyone else needed so that you could avoid the sting of their disappointment. You became an expert at self-disappearance, tucking away your true desires and opinions until you weren't even sure if they still existed. This masking wasn't a choice made from a place of strength, but a camouflage used to blend into the background of a parent's ego, ensuring you were never the cause of their next outburst. The performer knows how to say the right things and hit the right marks, but they are often profoundly lonely because no one is actually seeing the person behind the mask. You might find that in your adult life, you are highly successful or well-liked, yet you feel like a fraud, waiting for the moment the mask slips and everyone sees the scared child underneath. This identity formation was your way of staying connected to a narcissistic parent, but it has left you feeling like a ghost in your own life. This false self was built to protect the real you, but over time, the real you became so small and hidden that you lost the map to find your way back. You may find yourself agreeing with things you don't believe, or changing your personality based on who is in the room, all to maintain the safety of being liked. The tragedy of the performer is that even when you receive praise, it feels hollow because you know it is directed at the character you are playing, not the person you actually are. Deep within you, there is a silent wound belonging to the inner child who is still waiting for the permission to just be. This child has spent decades holding their breath, waiting for a validation that never came and a safety that was never guaranteed. Their needs were met with silence or redirected back to the parent, leaving a void where a sense of self-worth should have been planted and nurtured. The inner child carries the belief that they are fundamentally flawed because if they were good enough, their parent would have loved them the way they needed. This wound aches every time you face a minor setback or a perceived rejection, sending you spiraling back into the feelings of inadequacy you felt at 7 or 8 years old. You are still trying to earn the love of someone who was never capable of giving it, and that child inside is exhausted from the effort. Healing this wound requires you to stop looking toward the source of the injury for the cure, and instead look within at the child who is still crying out for help. You must become the witness to their suffering, acknowledging that the neglect and the pressure were real and that they were never your fault. The silent wound begins to heal only when you decide that your inner child no longer has to hide to be safe. I want to pause here for a moment, because I know how heavy this journey can feel, and I want you to know that you are not alone in this struggle. If you feel like you have been carrying the world on your shoulders for too long, could you do me a favor and just type, "I am learning to let go" in the comments below? Sharing this small phrase helps create a space where we all realize that our silent battles are understood by others, and it breaks the isolation that narcissistic parenting worked so hard to build. The unmet needs of that inner child don't just disappear. They manifest in adulthood as a profound difficulty with trust and a chronic sense of self-doubt. You might find yourself pushing people away when things get too serious, or perhaps you struggle to rest because you feel that your worth is only as good as your latest achievement. Your emotional regulation becomes a battleground where you either feel too much or nothing at all, as the old survival patterns continue to dictate how you interact with the world. These adult manifestations are the echoes of a childhood where your authenticity was sacrificed for the sake of attachment. Biologically, a child must attach to their caregiver to survive, even if that caregiver is the source of their pain. You chose the parent over yourself because you had no other choice, and that sacrifice of your true self has left you with a lingering sense of betrayal that you now project onto the people who try to love you today. You might find yourself in a cycle of seeking out people who mirror the unavailability of your parents, unconsciously trying to win a different ending to an old story. This repetition compulsion is a desperate attempt by your psyche to finally feel seen, but it often leads back to the same familiar pain. Breaking this cycle requires the painful realization that you cannot fix the past by recreating it in the present with people who are unable to meet your needs. The deep consequences of this upbringing show up as a persistent internal narrative that tells you that you are difficult to love or that your needs are a burden. You might have developed coping styles that involve extreme independence, thinking that if you don't need anyone, no one can ever hurt you again. This relational isolation is a long-term effect of being taught that people are unpredictable and that vulnerability is a weakness to be exploited rather than a bridge to connection. Your internal monologue is often the voice of the narcissistic parent, criticizing your every move and reminding you of your failures. This introjected voice keeps you in a state of shame, making it difficult to celebrate your wins or believe in your own potential. You have become your own harshest warden, enforcing the rules of a prison that you should have been allowed to leave years ago. These consequences ripple out into your physical health, your career choices, and your ability to experience joy without a sense of impending doom. You may suffer from chronic fatigue or unexplained aches, as your body finally collapses under the weight of decades of suppressed emotion. To heal, you must begin to dismantle these consequences one by one, replacing the internal critic with a voice of self-compassion and truth. Healing begins with the courageous act of awareness and becoming a witness to your own history without the lens of self-gaslighting. You have to stop telling yourself it wasn't that bad or that you were just a difficult child, and instead, acknowledge the reality of the emotional neglect you endured. Witnessing your own pain is the first step toward breaking the cycle, as you finally give yourself the empathy that was denied to you by the people who were supposed to provide it. This awareness acts like a light in a dark room, revealing that the monsters you feared were actually just the shadows of people who didn't know how to love. You begin to see that your behaviors weren't signs of brokenness, but evidence of your incredible resilience and will to survive. Once you stop gaslighting yourself, you can finally start to trust your own perceptions and feelings again. As a witness, you stand beside your younger self and say, "I see what happened to you, and it was wrong." This act of validation is the most powerful weapon against the legacy of narcissism, as it reclaims the truth of your experience. You are no longer a victim of a distorted reality. You are the author of a new, honest narrative where your voice is the only one that truly matters. Even as a high-functioning adult, you might still carry the wound of survival, characterized by a chronic sense of responsibility for things that are not yours to fix. You might be the person everyone leans on, the one who never breaks down. Yet inside, you are drowning in the suppression of your own emotions. This high-functioning exterior is just another layer of the old survival strategy, a way to stay indispensable so that you can't be discarded or ignored. You have learned to manage the chaos of others while ignoring the storm inside your own heart. This constant doing is a defense against being, because when you stop moving, the pain of your past starts to catch up with you. You fear that if you ever stop being the responsible one, you will lose your value and everyone will leave you. This wound keeps you in a state of perpetual on-call status, where you cannot truly relax because you are waiting for the next emergency to handle. You are an expert at fixing other people's lives while yours feels like it's being held together by sheer willpower. True recovery involves learning that you are allowed to be low-functioning sometimes, to be messy, and to be the one who needs help. You might recognize this legacy in the way you still seek permission for basic self-care, or how you find yourself holding your breath when you're stressed, as if trying to make yourself as small as possible. These are the physical markers of a life spent in a state of perpetual readiness for a conflict that is no longer happening. Recognizing these patterns is not a sign of failure, but a roadmap for the work of reparenting that lies ahead. The habit of permission-seeking is a lingering shadow of a parent who controlled your every move and thought. You are still waiting for an invisible authority figure to tell you it's okay to rest, to eat, or to be happy. Breaking this legacy means becoming your own authority and realizing that you have the inherent right to exist and thrive without anyone's approval. The breath holding is a physical manifestation of the hypervigilance you learned as a child. Your body is still waiting for the other shoe to drop, even in moments of peace. Learning to breathe deeply is an act of defiance against the past, a way of telling your nervous system that the war is over, and you are finally safe to take up space. The reparenting process involves stepping into the role of the compassionate guardian for your inner child, giving them the very things they were starved of in the past. It means telling yourself that you are safe now, that your feelings matter, and that you don't have to perform to earn your place in the world. It is a slow, deliberate practice of building a relationship with yourself that is based on consistency and kindness rather than conditional approval. You must learn to listen to the small, quiet needs of that child, the need for a nap, the need for play, the need to say no. When you fulfill these needs, you are teaching your nervous system that you can be trusted to take care of yourself. You are building the secure attachment that you never received, creating a solid internal foundation that no one can ever take away from you again. Reparenting is not about a single grand gesture, but 1,000 small choices to be kind to yourself. It's about how you talk to yourself when you make a mistake, and how you protect your peace from people who treat you like your parents did. This is the most important work you will ever do, as it transforms you from a survivor into a person who is truly alive. Shadow work requires you to turn toward the pain you've been running from with radical honesty, sitting with the grief of the childhood you deserved but never had. This isn't about wallowing in the past, but about integrating the parts of your experience that you've kept in the dark so they no longer have the power to control your reactions. By mourning what was lost, you clear the space for something new and authentic to grow in its place. The shadow contains the forbidden emotions your parents wouldn't allow, like anger, sadness, and true joy. You must invite these parts of yourself back to the table, acknowledging that they were only trying to protect you. When you stop fearing your own pain, you stop being a prisoner of it. Sitting with grief is a profound act of self-love, as it honors the reality of your suffering. You are allowed to be angry about what was taken from you, and sad for the child who had to grow up so fast. This shadow work is the gateway to your true power, as it allows you to stop hiding and start living with the full range of your human experience. In your relationships today, you might see these patterns play out when you interpret a partner's need for space as a total abandonment, or when you find it impossible to set a boundary because you fear it will end the connection. These are concrete examples of how the past lives on in the present, turning modern interactions into reenactments of old traumas. Understanding this allows you to pause and ask what the inner child actually needed in those moments of fear. You might find yourself over-explaining your actions to avoid conflict, a direct carryover from having to justify your existence to a narcissistic parent. Or you may find that you attract people who need fixing, because that is the only role you feel comfortable playing in a relationship. Recognizing these examples helps you to see that your current struggles are not personal failings, but symptoms of a wound that is ready to be healed. When you see these patterns in action, you can choose a different response, one that honors your current safety rather than your past fear. You can learn to state your needs clearly without apology and to walk away from people who do not respect your boundaries. This relational work is where the healing truly becomes visible, as you start to build connections based on mutual respect rather than survival. The foundational questions we must ask ourselves revolve around safety and visibility. What did it feel like to be you back then, and what does that part of you need to hear right now? By exploring these emotional needs, you begin the transformation from a person who reacts out of fear to one who responds from a place of grounded authenticity. You start to see that boundaries aren't walls to keep people out, but gates that allow the right people in while protecting your peace. Ask yourself, who was I supposed to be before the world told me who I had to be to survive? This question leads you back to your core, to the parts of you that are untouched by the trauma of your upbringing. When you find the answers, you find the roadmap for the rest of your life. What does your inner child need today? Is it rest? Is it to be told they are enough? By answering these foundational questions daily, you create a life that is built on your own terms. You are no longer living a script written by a narcissistic parent. You are writing your own story, one day at a time. As you continue this journey, I would love for you to stay connected with this community of healing by subscribing to the channel. We are all walking this path together, learning how to reclaim our lives from the shadows of the past, and your presence here adds to the collective strength of everyone trying to find their way back to themselves. We focus on gentle guidance and building the trust that was once broken, ensuring that you always have a supportive place to turn when the road feels long. Transformation is not about becoming a completely different person. It is about reclaiming the identity that was always there, buried under the weight of someone else's expectations. It is the emergence of a new pattern where you feel a sense of safety within your own skin and the freedom to be authentic without the constant fear of retribution. You learn that healing is an act of integration, bringing all the fragmented pieces of your story together into a whole that is resilient and self-aware. As the wise awareness grows, you might remember that as the light grows, so do the shadows, but you are now the one holding the lantern. This transformation is marked by the moments when you choose yourself over the approval of others. It is the quiet victory of waking up and realizing that your life finally belongs to you. You are building a future where your past is a teacher, not a prison. The transformation is complete when you can look at the person in the mirror and feel a deep sense of belonging to yourself. You are no longer pushing people away for reasons you don't remember. You are inviting the right people in for reasons you finally understand. This process of becoming whole means reconnecting with that inner child, not as a source of pain, but as a source of wonder and vitality that was preserved despite the coldness of the environment. You are no longer the caretaker of a parent's ego. You are the architect of your own emotional landscape. As you move forward, remember that the goal isn't perfection, but a steady, loving movement toward a life where you are finally the one in charge of your own heart. You have the power to break the generational cycle of pain and to create a legacy of awareness and compassion for yourself and those you love. The path of healing is not a straight line, but every step you take away from the old survival patterns is a step toward your true self. You are deserving of a love that is safe, a life that is joyful, and a peace that is yours to keep. May you walk forward with the knowledge that you were always enough, even when you were told otherwise. You are the hero of your own story, the survivor who turned their pain into wisdom. Trust the process, trust yourself, and know that you are finally coming home.